I always wake up early. Been that way for as long as I can remember. Even now, at 74, I'm up before the sun. The house creaks the same way it always has. Floorboards groan under my feet. The coffee maker clicks on, automatic, just the way I programmed it back in 2006. I pour a cup, same mug I've used for 20 years, faded green, little chip on the lip from when I dropped it during the blackout of '08. Mornings are quiet here. Peaceful. Used to be 2 cups on the table. Mine, and Mary's. She liked hers weak, barely any grounds. I never understood it. Tasted like warm water. Today there's only 1 cup. Mine. And I'm the only one drinking it. We were married for 50 years. 5 decades. Raised kids. Built a life. Shared a bed, shared secrets. Or at least, I thought we did. Looking back, I should have known. She started changing about a year ago. More perfume. Less eye contact. Laughter that didn't reach her eyes. She'd go out with friends but never named them. Would come home smelling like places I hadn't been. I didn't say anything. At first. I didn't want to be that man, jealous, paranoid, old and bitter. But silence has a weight. And it crushes you slowly. Then one night, she came home late. Said she'd been to a book club. I nodded, smiled, said good night. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I waited until she drifted off, and I went to her phone. Locked, of course. But I'm not just some retiree who reads the paper and feeds birds. Back in the 70s, I worked for a branch of the government that doesn't exist on paper. Data security. Surveillance systems. I used to build hardware that could hear you through walls and software that could follow you halfway around the world without you knowing. Mary never really asked about it. She just knew I worked in intelligence. I broke her passcode in 20 minutes. The messages were all there. His name was Jonathan. John. He called her Honeybee. Said things I hadn't said to her in decades. She responded with fire. Her words were alive. Passionate. She sent him photos. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. He was our family doctor. Been coming to our house for years. Thanksgiving dinners. Fishing with me. While I was showing him where the fish bite, he was showing my wife things I haven't seen in years. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It felt cold. Like standing outside in winter without a coat. Just wind. So I started watching. I planted a device in her car. A small recorder under the seat. Another behind the living room bookshelf. Cameras, too. I made them myself, smaller than a paperclip, silent as a whisper. For 2 weeks, I listened. And then, I heard it. His voice. Soft, low, saying things I won't repeat. Her voice, laughing, gasping, moaning. The kind of sound I hadn't heard from her in 20 years. In my own house. In my own bed. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I simply stood there, watching the screen, with the kind of stillness only 50 years of discipline can teach you. And then I smiled. Because that was the moment I stopped being her husband. And started being her shadow. The next morning, I made her breakfast. 2 eggs, over easy, the way she likes them. Toast. Half a grapefruit. I poured her coffee, weak like always. She walked into the kitchen, smiled like nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek. I smiled back. Not because I forgave her, not because I forgot. But because she had no idea. That was the beginning of her end. She thought I was still her husband. But husbands forgive. Shadows don't. I continued the routine. Every morning, the same breakfast. Every evening, the same fake smile. I watched her phone when she left it unattended, mirrored the data to my secure drive. I tracked her movements, saved every text, every call, every moan that came through my hidden mics. John, the good doctor, had no clue either. He'd been a guest in my home, shared cigars with me on my porch, gave me advice about cholesterol. All the while, he was laying with my wife in the very bed I built for her. The files grew. I catalogued everything. I made backups, encrypted them, stored copies in multiple locations, digital and physical. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted complete control. One afternoon, I followed her. She said she was meeting her sister for lunch. I watched from across the parking lot as she slid into John's car, her hand resting on his thigh like they were teenagers. They drove off. I followed. They went to a hotel. Not a fancy one. One of those out-of-town places with heavy curtains and hourly rates. I didn't need to go inside. I already had access to the cameras, remotely hacked 2 nights prior. I recorded everything. Every movement. Every sound. Every betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, headphones on, eyes closed. Listening. Not because I enjoyed it. But because I wanted to memorize it. Every lie. Every sigh. Every whisper of my name when she was with another man. I was studying her like a soldier studies his enemy. The next day, I went to our lawyer. Not mine, ours. The same man who drafted our wills, who handled the estate when my father died. I told him I wanted to open a private trust. Quietly. Discreetly. I transferred all joint assets into that trust, legally, strategically. I forged no documents. I simply played within the rules of the system. Laws I helped build back in the day. Mary had signed over power of attorney to me 5 years ago, after my small stroke. She never rescinded it. That was her mistake. Over the next few weeks, I moved money. Properties. Stocks. All into a trust controlled by a shell company. The company had a fake board. Fake management. All built by me, hidden behind layers of proxies and blind accounts. She didn't notice. Why would she? I still made her breakfast. I still kissed her forehead. Meanwhile, I bought an apartment in another city under an alias. Set up a new bank account, got a new phone, new identity. I was building a life she couldn't find. And still, she smiled at me every day. She had no idea the floor was disappearing beneath her feet. Then I made contact with John's medical board. Anonymously. Sent them recordings. Emails. A full dossier of his relationship with a patient. That's what she was, technically, his patient. They opened an investigation. Quiet, at first. I made sure she knew nothing. Until the letter came in the mail. Certified. Stamped. From the Medical Ethics Committee. She opened it while we were at breakfast. I watched her face pale, her hand tremble. She didn't tell me what it said. She just folded it, tucked it into her purse, and left the table. I didn't say a word. Later that night, she cried in the bathroom. I could hear it through the vent. Not loud sobs. Just small, muffled gasps. I sat on the couch, lights off, and listened. That was the first crack. I wasn't done. Not even close. The next phase would hurt her in ways she never imagined. She took everything I gave her for 50 years and fed it to another man. Now, I was taking everything back. Piece by piece. Quietly. Like a shadow. By the end of that week, John was suspended from the medical board pending investigation. It wasn't public yet, but he knew. The look on his face at the country club told me everything. He saw me from across the lot. He froze. I just nodded. Calm. Polite. As if I didn't know he'd been sleeping with my wife. But I knew. I knew everything. That night, Mary came home later than usual. She tried to hide her anxiety, but her eyes gave her away. No words. Just silence. She set her purse down, poured herself a drink, and sat in the dark. I watched from the hallway. Quiet. Still. She didn't know I was watching. That was the beauty of it. By now, the house was fully wired. Every corner, every hallway. I could see her even when I wasn't home. I had cameras in her car, her phone mirrored to mine. There was nothing she did that I didn't see. She tried to call John later that night. He didn't answer. She tried again the next day. Voicemail. By the third day, she left him a message. Her voice shaking. Please, call me. I don't know what's going on. They said they're opening a case. I think someone knows. She was right. Someone did. And that someone wasn't finished. I filed a quiet inquiry with the IRS. Anonymously, of course. Claimed possible fraudulent medical billing practices by a local physician. I attached a few altered documents, crafted just enough to raise suspicion. That was all it took. Auditors were scheduled to visit John's clinic within a month. He had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, Mary was unraveling. I watched her sit alone in our bedroom, staring at a photo from our 25th anniversary. Her hands trembled. She whispered something to herself. I couldn't hear it. Regret? Guilt? Didn't matter. I moved on to the next part of my plan. The house. Our home had been in both our names for decades. But now, it was in the name of the trust. And the trust didn't list her as a beneficiary. She didn't know that yet. I contacted an old friend of mine, retired real estate attorney. Explained I was transferring ownership due to estate restructuring. All perfectly legal. All airtight. She was still living in a house she technically no longer owned. I waited for the right moment. One morning, I told her I'd be visiting a friend in another town for a few days. Packed a small bag, took the car, drove 2 blocks, parked, and walked back. She thought I was gone. That's when John came. Despite the investigation, the fear, the fallout, he still came. I watched them from my phone. Sitting in our kitchen. Talking in hushed tones. She was crying. He looked angry. Not protective, angry. At her. He blamed her. She begged him to stay. He left. She fell to the floor and sobbed. I watched all of it. Every broken breath. Every silent scream. I recorded it. Later that week, she called our son. I listened from the other line. Something's wrong, she said. With Dad. He's distant. Cold. I think he's hiding something. I smiled. He told her she was imagining things. That I'd always been quiet. That maybe it was just age. Even our children didn't believe her. That night, I returned home. Quiet as always. She hugged me. Tighter than she had in years. I didn't hug her back. She cooked dinner. Tried to talk. I let her. She rambled about John. How he was under review, how scared she was. I nodded. Must be tough, I said. She looked at me, searching for some trace of emotion. There was none. Because the man she married no longer existed. He died the moment she called another man baby in our bed. I slept in a separate room that night. She knocked. I didn't answer. In the dark, I heard her whisper through the door. I'm sorry. It was too late. I had plans. The kind of plans that end in silence. Permanent silence. But not death. Worse. Erasure. 3 weeks passed. John was formally suspended. Not just from the board, his entire license was placed under review. The hospital quietly removed his name from the physician roster. His patients were redirected. His staff stopped answering his calls. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The system did the work for me. Meanwhile, Mary pretended everything was fine. She smiled more, cooked elaborate dinners, even tried to kiss me goodnight. I let her. Not because I felt anything. But because I wanted her to think she was fixing it. The deeper the illusion, the harder the fall. While she baked casseroles and talked about a fresh start, I filed for an internal review of her charity position. She'd been chairwoman of a local foundation for over a decade, helping veterans, organizing fundraisers. I sent them a full anonymous packet. Photos of her with John, intimate, very intimate. Audio clips that, while not graphic, were clear enough to raise serious questions about her moral integrity. A fake tip about misappropriated funds, nothing provable, but enough to make them panic. 2 weeks later, she was asked to resign for the good of the organization. She cried. Loud this time. That was new. I watched her in the kitchen, wiping tears with a dish towel, trying to call her sister. She didn't pick up. Her phone buzzed. I read the messages before she did. One from an old friend. Heard what happened. So disappointed. Another. We trusted you, Mary. Shame. She dropped the phone. I walked in just as she bent down to pick it up. You okay? I asked, voice calm, empty. She shook her head, couldn't speak. Need me to cook tonight? I offered. She only nodded. And so I made dinner. Like a good husband. That weekend, I met with a private investigator. Not because I needed him to find anything, I already had everything. But I wanted a trail. A witness. He was ex-military, disciplined, discreet. I fed him everything, dates, names, locations. Told him I suspected my wife had defrauded me for years. Asked him to dig into financials. He found nothing, of course. Because I'd already taken care of all of it. But now there was a file. A record. Something that could surface later, when I needed it. The final thread was our family. Mary had always been the center of our social circle. Hostess of Thanksgiving. Organizer of birthdays. She played the part of matriarch well. Until I whispered a few carefully chosen words to our daughter. I think your mother's hiding something. That's all I said. No details. No accusations. But it was enough. The doubt took root. A week later, my daughter asked Mary directly about John. She stuttered. Tried to deny it. Then broke down. She admitted to the affair. Said it meant nothing. Said it was a mistake. Said it was during a hard time. Our daughter didn't yell. She just left. She took the grandkids with her. I didn't have to ask her to do that. Mary sat in the living room for hours that night. No TV. No music. Just silence. She didn't eat. Didn't speak. She just stared at the fireplace like it might swallow her whole. That was the moment she realized she was truly alone. But I wasn't done. I mailed copies of the affair records to John's ex-wife, who'd left him years ago with nothing but alimony and contempt. She posted them online. Anonymous accounts shared the story across local gossip forums, Facebook groups, even a few subreddits. It spread faster than I imagined. Suddenly, Mary couldn't go to the store without seeing whispers. Old friends stopped calling. Neighbors waved less. The walls closed in. And I was there for every moment. Every silent dinner. Every unanswered call. Every night she climbed into a bed that felt colder than death. One night, she finally asked me, "Do you still love me?" I looked her straight in the eyes. I did. Once. She cried herself to sleep. I didn't comfort her. Because I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her sentence. And she had no idea how long it would last. I waited 6 months. That was the key. Not acting too fast. Letting the rot set in. Letting her believe things might get better. Letting hope return, just enough to make its destruction feel like free fall. She tried. I'll give her that. She cleaned the house like we had guests coming. She cooked dinners she hadn't made in 20 years. She even bought a new dress and asked if I wanted to go out one evening. I told her no. She nodded like she understood. But I saw it. The flicker of pain behind her eyes. The way she bit her lip to keep from begging. She still didn't know. Didn't know that the house she polished didn't belong to her. That the money in our accounts wasn't hers anymore. That the car she drove was leased in the name of a shell company. And soon, she wouldn't know where her name even existed. I contacted an old associate of mine. He owed me favors. We used to work together in data systems, deep, dark digital places. Places no longer listed in government archives. I asked him to erase a name. Not entirely. That would be too suspicious. Just enough. A few keystrokes, and suddenly Mary's name vanished from our insurance plan. Then from our shared property records. Then from the Social Security notification list. She wasn't erased. She was just faded. Like a shadow at dusk. She noticed the first mistake when she tried to refill a prescription. The system says your name doesn't match the policy, the pharmacist said. She came home confused, holding the bottle like it had lied to her. I've been using the same pharmacy for years, she muttered. How could this happen? I shrugged. Clerical error, maybe. Next came the bank. She went to withdraw cash, and the teller told her the account was frozen. Joint fraud alert, they said. We'll need verification from both parties. She called me in a panic. I don't understand. Our money. Our money? I asked. Are you sure it's still ours? She hung up. For days, she tried calling lawyers. But the ones she trusted stopped returning her calls. I'd already spoken to them. Not threatened, just informed. Gently. Quietly. That this was a matter of identity confusion. And no one wants to touch messy legal disputes involving potential fraud. She tried to reach our old accountant. He was on vacation. Indefinitely. Everything she touched dissolved. Like trying to grab smoke. Even her driver's license expired, because somehow, the DMV had no record of her renewal. One night, I found her in the garage, sitting in the car with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel. She didn't look up when I walked in. Do you hate me? She asked. I sat down on the steps beside the wall. No, I said. Hate is too loud. I prefer silence. She started crying again. But crying doesn't change history. It doesn't undo betrayal. I went back inside. The next morning, she found a letter on the table. No envelope. Just paper, neatly folded. Inside was a single sentence. "You're not who you think you are anymore." She didn't speak to me for a week. But silence was all I wanted. Let her live in it. She stopped calling people. Stopped trying to fix things. She wandered the house like a ghost. Eventually, she packed a bag. Said she was going to stay with her sister. But her sister had changed numbers. Blocked her, even. She didn't know why. But I did. Because I sent her sister everything. The recordings. The photos. The timeline. Even the hospital reports of Jan's misconduct, tied neatly back to Mary's influence. I didn't tell them what to believe. I just showed them what she never wanted seen. Mary never left the house. Because there was nowhere else to go. And soon, even that wouldn't be hers. Because I'd filed the final paperwork. The trust would assume legal ownership of the home by month's end. The deed would no longer show Jack and Mary. Just a corporate signature. She wouldn't be evicted. Not yet. She'd just stop existing in it. Like she had never lived here at all. That night, I stood in the yard, looking up at the window where she slept. Not in our room. She hadn't dared sleep there in months. She used the guest bed. The one we used to give visitors. Now she was the visitor. And soon, not even that. Because the next step wasn't about assets. It was about identity. About erasing her in the only place she still existed. In memory. And in the mirror. I once heard someone say that real punishment isn't prison or pain, it's being seen differently by the people you love. Being stared at like you're something broken. Something less. I remembered that when I sent the packages. I didn't send them from our city. That would have been too obvious. I drove 2 towns over, used a post office box registered under one of my aliases. Each envelope was identical, a plain white folder, unmarked, unassuming. Inside were selected documents. Photocopies of texts. Transcripts of audio recordings. 1 or 2 images, just enough. Not explicit. But clear. And a letter. Written in a neutral tone, it said, "This woman betrayed her husband of 50 years with their family doctor, while pretending to uphold moral standards in the community. She continues to live off his name and legacy, without consequence." I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. I sent copies to every organization she'd worked with, the Veterans Fund, the Church Board, the Women's Charity League. I mailed a copy to the editor of the local newspaper, and 2 to people who ran neighborhood Facebook groups. Then I waited. It took 3 days. The first to call was Carol, her closest friend of 30 years. I listened from the hallway as Mary answered. Her voice was quiet, unsure. Then sharp. "No. No, that's not true." "Who told you that?" Her tone collapsed within seconds. From denial to desperation. "I made a mistake. It wasn't like that. Please, Carol." But the call ended. I could hear the silence. She didn't move for hours. The next morning, she didn't cook breakfast. Didn't even come downstairs. When I checked on her, the bedroom door was locked. She didn't answer. So I left her there. Later, she tried to log into her email. But the password was changed. She tried again. Still nothing. Then she tried calling her old co-chair at the Charity League. I intercepted that call. Forwarded it to voicemail. She left a message. Her voice cracking. I don't know who's doing this. I need help. No one called back. It was time for the next step. At the local bank, I filed a petition to have her removed from the safe deposit box. Presented documents from the trust. All legally sound. The bank manager recognized me. He didn't even ask questions. When she came in days later to retrieve her mother's jewelry, they told her she wasn't listed on the box. She stood at the counter, stunned. "I'm his wife," she said. The teller smiled politely. "Your name isn't on the access list anymore." She came home angry. Furious. For the first time in months, she raised her voice. "What the hell is going on, Jack?" I looked up from my book. "What do you mean?" "You know damn well what I mean. My name, my accounts, everything's falling apart." I set the book down. "You're acting like I did this to you." She stared at me. "Didn't you?" I didn't blink. "You did this to yourself." She stood there, mouth open, hands trembling. And in that moment, she finally understood. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't some bureaucratic error or digital glitch. This was deliberate. She walked out of the room, slower than I expected. Not defeated. Not yet. But hollow. That night, I sent the final email. From another alias, to a local reporter who thrived on community scandals. Subject: a public hypocrisy hidden in plain sight. Attached were the same files. But I added something new, a clip of Mary talking to John, one that sounded especially damning. She'd said, "He's old, John. He'll be dead in a few years. Why shouldn't we enjoy ourselves?" It was real. She had said it. The next morning, her face was online. Not everywhere, but in just enough places. Shared. Commented. Gossiped over. People asked if it was true. Others said they always suspected. Some defended her, most didn't. I printed the screenshots and left them on the kitchen table. She didn't touch them. She didn't touch anything. Her world was collapsing, and she had no tools left to hold it up. She sat by the window most days now, drinking tea that went cold before she finished it. She didn't wear makeup anymore. Didn't comb her hair. She was becoming a shadow in her own home. And I wasn't finished yet. Because the next step would be permanent. Not emotional. Not social. But legal. I was going to make sure the name Mary vanished from everything that ever mattered. And she would watch it happen. One page at a time. By now, Mary barely left the house. She didn't ask questions anymore. She didn't look for explanations. She existed in a fog, a woman slowly sinking through invisible waters. Even the smallest interactions drained her. She stopped answering the phone. Stopped checking the mail. Stopped opening the curtains. Which made the next phase easier. I had prepared everything months in advance. Legal structures, digital routes, notarized documents, all waiting in sequence. Precision was my weapon, and I wielded it like a scalpel. First, I changed our mailing address. Not the physical house, just the legal registry. I moved everything to a P.O. box under the name of the trust. Overnight, she was disconnected from every service she once controlled. Utilities, healthcare, subscriptions. When she tried to log in, every system told her she didn't have access. She thought it was another glitch. It wasn't. Next, I submitted a formal petition to amend our estate structure. With power of attorney still legally in effect, signed by her own hand 5 years ago, I restructured the ownership of all major assets under the corporate veil of the trust. The house. The cars. The remaining investments. The forms were signed, stamped, sealed. I was the sole trustee. She was nothing. No co-signer. No beneficiary. No legal claim. She tried calling the lawyer. The one who had drawn up our wills. He never answered. Because I had already visited him, weeks earlier. I told him I wanted to adjust our estate plan in preparation for eventual memory decline. I cited a fictional early diagnosis. He nodded sympathetically, too polite to ask questions. Everything I needed, he gave me. And now Mary was a ghost with a heartbeat. She wasn't listed on any deed. Wasn't registered on any account. Wasn't authorized on any policy. One day, I left her a stack of envelopes. Inside each one was a rejection. Application denied. Access revoked. Request declined due to insufficient verification. She read them slowly. Over and over. Her hands shaking more with each page. Then, the final blow. A letter from the Department of Vital Records. It stated that due to inconsistencies in name registration and irregularities in marital documentation, her records were flagged for legal review. It was official now. Even the government wasn't sure she existed. She confronted me that evening. Her voice was low. Broken. I know what you're doing. I said nothing. I know this isn't some glitch or mistake. It's you. You doing this. I kept stirring my tea. You can't erase me, Jack. I'm your wife. I finally looked at her. You were. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the couch, as if my words had pulled the bones from her body. I didn't comfort her. Instead, I handed her the final document. A revocation of her name from our joint family foundation. One we had built together. Her name removed from every plaque, every certificate. She stared at it. Then ripped it in half. Then again. Then again. But it didn't matter. The papers were just paper. The law had already changed. She spent the next week in silence. No television. No music. Just long walks through the house, trailing her fingers along the walls like a widow mourning a husband already buried. She tried writing a letter to our son. But I intercepted it before she could send it. It sat on my desk, unopened. I didn't need to read it. She had nothing left to say. One morning, I found her sitting on the back porch. The same place we used to have coffee. Where she once kissed my cheek and said, 50 years feels like a blink, doesn't it? She didn't hear me approach. I stood behind her and waited. She finally spoke. You've taken everything. No, I said. You gave it away. I just took it back. She nodded slowly. You're not the man I married. I leaned closer. No. That man died when you decided someone else was more exciting. We stood in silence for a while. And then I left her there. Because there was still one thing left to do. The final signature. The one that would remove her name from the deed forever. Once that was done, the house would belong entirely to the trust. And she would no longer have any legal right to live there. Not even as a tenant. She would be trespassing. And I would have every right to ask her to leave. Or have her removed. By law. And when that day came, I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. Because the law would speak for me. And she would finally be gone. Not just from my home. But from the world she once ruled. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Plain envelope. No warning. Just one line on the front, heir to the current occupant. She brought it in with the rest of the mail, not suspecting anything. I sat at the table, eating toast. She opened it. Read the first line. Her breath caught in her throat. I watched her eyes move left to right. Slowly. Then faster. Then again. She looked up at me, shaking. What is this? I took a sip of coffee. Read it out loud. She hesitated. Then did. Notice of revocation of residential rights, effective immediately upon receipt. Trust ownership assumes full legal control. Non-listed occupants may be considered trespassers under State Code 13.7. She dropped the letter. What does this mean? She whispered. It means, I said, you don't live here anymore. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She picked the letter back up, reading again as if repetition might change the meaning. Her hands trembled. She turned pale. This is my house, Jack. No. It was. Until you decided it wasn't enough. You can't do this. We built this place together. I nodded. We did. And now I'm rebuilding it, alone. She stood there, eyes wide, hands clenched into fists at her sides. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. You throwing me out? I'm correcting a mistake. She stepped forward, desperate now. We were married for 50 years. Exactly. Everything we have, everything I gave you. You didn't give. You borrowed. And you broke it. Tears filled her eyes. Real ones. Not the performative kind. Not the ones she used to win arguments or get sympathy from neighbors. These were the tears of someone who had run out of options. You planned this, she said, voice hoarse. You've been planning this since? Since the day I heard you call him a baby in my house. She looked down. Couldn't hold my gaze anymore. How long do I have? Until sunset. Her knees buckled, and she dropped into the nearest chair like her bones had given up. She didn't plead. Didn't argue. Just sat there, stunned. I stood and left the room. That afternoon, the moving van arrived. I had scheduled it the week prior. Quietly. The men knew what to do. No questions asked. Professional, fast, emotionless. I pointed to what was hers. Clothes. Personal items. Some jewelry. A few books. Nothing more. The family photo stayed. The furniture stayed. The life stayed. Only she was leaving. She tried to pack herself at first. Fumbled with boxes, moved too slowly. Eventually, the movers took over. She just stood in the hallway, watching as her life was dismantled one object at a time. She tried to call our daughter again. No answer. She tried the church. They didn't return her messages. By 4 p.m., the house was quiet again. The van doors closed with a heavy metal thud. I signed the receipt. She stood on the porch with a single suitcase in her hand. What now? She asked. There's a motel 2 blocks down. That's not a life. No. It's what's left of one. She didn't move. Just stared at me. I loved you. I tilted my head. Too late. Then I stepped back and closed the door. Locked it. Not because I feared her return, but because I needed to hear that final click. The sound of closure. I stood in the living room for a long time after that, listening to the silence, letting it settle like dust over everything. Then I turned on the light and sat in my chair. My house. My life. Mine again. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't smile. This wasn't about victory. It was about restoration. She had stolen something from me. my trust, my dignity, my name. And now, I had taken it back. Piece by piece. I walked to the fireplace. Picked up the photo from our 25th anniversary. Took out the frame. Slid out the image. Then I took a lighter from my pocket. Lit the corner. Watched it burn. She was gone now. Not just from my house. But from the walls. From the records. From the world. Just smoke. Nothing more. The first night after she was gone, I slept with the windows open. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for years. No footsteps on the stairs. No drawers slamming. No hushed phone calls behind closed doors. Just wind and stillness. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, not thinking about her, not really. Not with emotion. More like a puzzle that had finally been solved. By morning, I didn't even have to remind myself she was gone. I just knew. I made breakfast like always. Toast, eggs, black coffee. No second plate. No small talk. No perfume lingering in the hallway. And it felt right. The house was mine again. The way I built it. The way I imagined it would last. I cleaned out the guest bedroom that afternoon. The one she'd been using near the end. Stripped the bed. Boxed the clothes. Vacuumed. Bleached the walls. She hadn't left much, but every fiber of fabric carried a memory. I made sure they were all gone. In the garage, I cleared her boxes off the shelf. Old photos, letters, books she never read. I burned most of it. Quietly. In the metal drum behind the shed. Ash doesn't lie. It doesn't beg. It doesn't carry perfume. It's just gone. Neighbors didn't ask questions. A few waved like nothing had changed. Others looked away. Word had spread. Some still whispered about the scandal. The affair. The fallout. The eviction. But no one asked me for my side. And I didn't offer it. Let them imagine. Let them guess. That was part of the power, letting people fill in the blanks with their own fears. I spent more time outside now. Mowed the lawn. Trimmed the hedges. Repaired the broken tiles on the porch. I replaced the light bulbs she always said were too bright. I wanted them brighter now. I wanted every corner of this place to be lit and exposed. Nothing in shadow. Not anymore. Inside, I repainted the kitchen. Removed the floral curtains she liked. Replaced them with clean white blinds. Straight. Simple. Order. In the attic, I found the photo album from our first trip to Oregon. 1972, back when we still held hands in public. I looked through it once. Page by page. Not slowly. Not with nostalgia. Just to see. Then I closed it and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Some history can stay buried. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was finished. There's a difference. She texted once. About a week after leaving. It just said, I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Another came the next day, please just talk to me. I have nothing. Still, I said nothing. She sent a photo. Her suitcase next to a cheap motel bed. No makeup. Red eyes. Not for me, for herself. I deleted it. A week passed. Then another. Eventually, the messages stopped. And then silence again. It was perfect. I opened a new bank account. In my name alone. No aliases. No hidden trusts. This was different. This was mine. Started shopping at different stores. Changed my routine. Walked in the evenings instead of the mornings. Switched to a new barber. Got a new jacket. Nothing dramatic, just enough to shift the energy. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't owe anyone explanations. At the library, I checked out books I hadn't touched in decades. Political thrillers. Military biographies. Things that reminded me who I used to be. Before I let comfort dull my edge, I started writing again. Journaling, mostly. Quiet reflections. Not poetry. Not rants. Just facts. Cold, clear, deliberate. One night, I wrote this sentence and underlined it twice, as she thought she was the storm. She forgot I built the shelter. It made me smile. Not because it was clever, but because it was true. The day I saw her again was unplanned. She was at the gas station. Disheveled. Wearing someone else's coat. Hair pulled into a messy knot. She didn't see me at first. I watched her from the driver's seat. She moved slower now. Hollow. Like something inside had been removed. She turned. Our eyes met. For just a second. Then she looked down and walked away. I didn't move. Didn't follow. Didn't feel anything. She was just another stranger on a cold morning. And that's all she would ever be again. Spring came late that year. The yard thawed slowly. The grass didn't want to grow back. But I didn't mind. Dead ground has its own kind of honesty. It doesn't pretend. It just is. I sat on the porch most mornings now. Same chair. Same spot. But everything around it had changed. There were no footsteps behind me. No voice asking about the mail, or the groceries, or what was for dinner. No perfume drifting out from the front door. Just air. Just time. One morning, a neighbor walked by with her dog. She paused, looked at the house, then at me. "You're holding up well," she said. I just nodded. She hesitated. I heard about Mary. Still, I said nothing. She didn't ask anything else. Just kept walking. That was the last time anyone brought up her name. Eventually, the world forgets. It always does. I started going into town more often. The same diner I used to avoid because she didn't like the booths. I sat in them now. Drank burnt coffee. Watched the same waitress wipe the same counter every morning like it was a ritual. No one recognized me. No one knew who I used to be. And that was good. I passed her once again, Mary. She was waiting at a bus stop. Alone. Same coat, same hollow expression. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and just couldn't lift her head. She looked like a statue made of regret. And I didn't feel pity. Because pity is a gift. And she didn't deserve it. She chose her path. I simply walked mine further than she expected. There were no more texts. No calls. No letters. Just silence. She vanished from the records. The trust held everything. Her old email accounts closed. Her name no longer attached to anything that mattered. The world, legally and practically, had no room for her. And that was the point. The revenge wasn't the removal. It was the forgetting. Years of marriage, wiped clean. A whole life together, unremembered. She was still breathing. Still walking. Still eating food and paying bills. But her identity was gone. That's a deeper death than any grave. And I was content. Not joyful. Not proud. Just at peace. I spent time restoring the basement workshop. Cleaned the tools. Rewired the lights. Built birdhouses. I didn't sell them. Didn't even hang most of them. I just built them. Because creation is control. And I needed to remind myself what I could build, after so much destruction. Every now and then, I'd sit down and write. Not letters. Not confessions. Just lines. Thoughts. Memories that didn't ache anymore. Like this one? She once told me, "You too quiet." And now, she's drowning in silence. I smiled when I wrote that. Then I closed the notebook and didn't open it again for days. I didn't date anyone. Didn't look for companionship. Because after 50 years with someone who pretended to love me while betraying me, I had no appetite for pretense. I had myself. And I liked that man again. One day, I took a walk down to the cemetery. Not to visit her. She wasn't dead. But I walked past the plots, reading names. Couples buried together. Same headstone. Same quote etched between the dates, together forever. I stopped at one that said, she was his light. He was her home. And I thought about what mine would say. Nothing, probably. Just my name. A date. A stone. I didn't need a message. The message had already been sent, in everything I'd done. By the time I returned home, the sun had started to set. I poured a glass of scotch. Sat on the porch. Watched the sky bleed into the horizon. And I said aloud, to no one. She thought she ended me. But I was just beginning. No applause. No audience. Just the wind, and the faint rustle of leaves. And that was enough. Because some victories don't need witnesses. They just need to be complete.